years ago, a young meteorologist saw it coming.
We have an intense coastal storm now about 200 miles off the Maryland coast.
Fast, fierce, and disastrous.
All people are to remain in their homes.
Tonight, remembering the fury of February 1978. Will we feel it again?
It's not a matter of if the blizzard of '78 will happen again. It's only a matter of when.
Good evening. 30 years ago, life as we knew it came to a stop. The biggest blizzard of the century swept the Northeast, killing more than 50 people, permanently altering the coastline, and compelling many New Englanders to extraordinary acts of courage and heroism. Could it happen again? And if it does, are we ready? We'll answer those questions for you tonight, and your questions as well, with the help of Storm Team 5's Harvey Leonard and Dick Albert. Anthony?
All right, Mary, that's correct. We're glad to have Dick and Harvey with us tonight. Harvey, this storm really came at a very significant point, if you will, in your forecasting career.
I think so. You know, it was my first winter forecasting on Boston television. I think we could say baptism by fire.
Absolutely.
You did a great job with the storm, Harvey. It was an unforgettable storm. Anyone who lived through this storm will never forget it. Let's take a look. It was the storm of the century. The blizzard of '78 dropped over 2 feet of snow on the Bay State in 32 hours. Near hurricane force winds created snow drifts up to 15 feet and pummeled the coastline from Rockport to Rhode Island. Over 3,500 cars and trucks were trapped on Route 128, and coastal damage forced 10,000 people into emergency shelters. The storm claimed 54 lives and caused $1 billion in damage.
You will not find one more classic than this, even in a textbook. We have an intense coastal storm now about 200 miles off the Maryland coast. Its central pressure is dropping quickly. We'll probably get close to 29 inches.
Back in '78, forecasting the weather was no easy task. Some weather services predicted snowfall amounts of around 6 inches, but others took a bigger leap.
For those of you who think we're going to miss it, forget that idea and throw it right in the garbage, because we are going to get it, and it is going to be a good one.
I was in Denver at the time, but a young meteorologist in his freshman year at a Boston television station was able to warn his audience about the storm 36 hours before it hit. Computer models were still in their infancy back then, so Harvey Leonard went with his gut and some common sense.
I remember Thursday night being on the air and talking about a possibility of a major snowstorm at the beginning of the following week, and Friday night I was talking about it more. I think my words were something to the effect that one doesn't want to go too far out on the limb, though, or one may never get back as a forecaster.
But really on Saturday, February 4th, Harvey did venture out on that limb.
What's going to happen is a tremendous amount of energy in high levels of the atmosphere pouring down to the southeast will really enhance the development of this storm, and that's the one that we expect to come up the coast in a fashion something like that. With all the cold air that's over us now, unquestionably, the bulk of this storm has to be in the form of snow. We think it's going to be a big one.
Late on Monday the 6th, wind-whipped snow began to fall at a staggering rate. Soon it would wreak havoc inland and crush the coast. Did you expect the damage on the coast to be so extensive?
No, absolutely not. There's no way I could take credit for that. I really did not envision the degree of damage and destruction and devastation that happened along the coastline. I think the whole tidal situation was probably the most under-forecast of the storm.
A slow-moving storm, high winds, 4 consecutive high tides of a new moon. The result, chaos in the towns hit hardest, Scituate, Hull, and Revere.
It was a horror scene to see the Atlantic Ocean streaming into your backyard and onto the side streets. It was truly a horrifying experience.
If anyone has any additional questions, if you'd kindly come up to this desk, I'll help you
Shared
as
events,
best I can.
especially difficult ones, can create a strong sense of community overnight. The late Cardinal Medeiros found just that at a shelter in Revere.
What I see here today is the goodness in people, both in those who came or are the victims of the blizzard and those who are helping them out. There's a great spirit of cooperation and of kindness, real goodness, and that's very, very heartening.
New England is no stranger to severe winter storms, but the blizzard of '78 remains the benchmark for those who lived through it.
What would you say to people that are too young to remember that storm?
We do a broadcast like this, which does let people know what the magnitude of a winter storm can be here. And knowing that it's happened, even if you didn't live through it, you realize it can happen again. And we're here to tell everybody that it's just a matter of time until a storm similar to that does happen again.
All right, so Harvey, given what you've just said, what if it does hit again or did hit again? Are we better prepared? Would we be better prepared?
I think so. I mean, the storm is still going to do what it's going to do. But in terms of us, okay, the word would be out there. It would be more universal. It would be early. It would be often. People would be finding out on the internet. They go to the bostonchannel.com when they're not watching Channel 5, and you find it out that way too. And I think the state, in anticipation of such a major storm, would be shut down except to emergency vehicles. So you'd have so many less vehicles on the road. I think that would help out a lot. But if you're going to get a couple of tractor trailers that jackknife early in a storm, which is what happened, then everything backs up behind it. That's what really started that, and then the snow just piled up and piled up.
All right, so we're better prepared, but there still could be massive damage along the coast,
Oh,
Dick,
absolutely.
right?
There were 4 successive high tides where the water never really got out again. It was low tide. It was high tide at low tide. So we had the new moon, astronomically very high tides. We had the northeast winds pounding in. So we would have an extreme amount of damage. Now, maybe even more because there's more building right along the coast. Although people might have 3 or 4 days in advance, and maybe they would take some precautions. Maybe they would board up their houses and get stuff, their boats out and moored. And,
but those buildings caked with ice and snow, that would still happen.
That would still happen. There were thousands of houses that were damaged or destroyed. I think that would happen again.
All right, Dick, Harvey, thank you very much. See the blizzard through our viewers' eyes and share your own blizzard photos on our website. Go to thebostonchannel.com. You'll find yourself immersed in a very special section of photos and videos, memories of the storm, as well as contributions from Harvey and Dick.
Those powerful photos that you'll see throughout this broadcast. We do want to thank the Boston Globe for combing through their archives and providing us with some of these amazing photos. A blizzard notebook from a veteran News Center 5 reporter right after this. The storm's devastation on the South Shore, Boston Globe photographer Bill Brett was lucky to escape with his life.
And News Center 5's Jorge Quiroga found himself assigned to the North Shore and a community really on the edge of panic. Here's Jorge.
For renowned Boston Globe photographer Bill Brett, the blizzard of '78 remains the single most memorable event of his career. For days, he and several colleagues lived out of a Howard Johnson's motel by the expressway.
We didn't want to be in a position that we couldn't get out. So we stayed at the hotel. We had our scanners all set up there, and we worked around there. Bob Dean, he had chains on his car, so he was able to pick people up, get them into the Globe to get the photographs to be developed.
Brett says initially the city went eerily silent. The snow so deep that many cars were only visible by their antennas. But running on sheer adrenaline, he took to the streets.
I remember meeting this kid in the lobby, and he said, I saw him get off the snowmobile, and I asked him, I says, is there any chance we could rent the snowmobile? And he said to me, he says, sure. So I remember at the time, I said, I'll give you $50 if you just drive me around.
As the storm dissipated, Brett says he saw Bostonians reaching out to each other in ways he's only witnessed one other time since, after 9/11. The only wrinkle in this love fest for Brett, a visit later by a detective to inform him something had been fishy about his snowmobiling chauffeur.
I always remembered after the storm that the police asked me if I saw this guy with this snowmobile, and it turned out it wasn't his. He borrowed it from, I think it was Sears Roebuck, which was in the back. And so it was pretty enterprising. I thought it was pretty good, but we were able to move around, which was great.
When the storm finally stopped, Brett took to the air in a helicopter to survey the coastal devastation along the South Shore. What he saw was mind-boggling. Houses tossed around like shoeboxes. But then as he hovered over Scituate, suddenly, without warning, the chopper went silent.
As we were coming along 3A, the pilot said to me, he says, "We're going down." And I said, "Oh my God," I could hear a noise. And we were down in seconds, but we bounced because there was so much snow. We landed right behind the Scituate police station. We just kept bouncing. It was unbelievable.
Wearing loafers, Brett trudged in chest-deep snow to the police station, while the pilot jury-rigged a snap belt so the chopper could take off again.
We were real low. We hovered all the way back to the Globe. We dropped on the Globe. Following day, the Patriot Ledger, I believe it was, rented the same helicopter company. They landed in the trees in the Blue Hills.
North of Boston, the blizzard also pounded the coastline with the combined fury of a hurricane and a tsunami. I know, I was there. My crew and I were sent to Revere by Channel 5, where residents were trapped in flooded homes with no electricity and no way out.
30 years ago, in the blizzard of '78, it was the busiest night I've ever spent in this department. We arrived at work just before 6 o'clock. We went out at 6:30, and we never came back.
We couldn't get people out. They waited too long, and that's generally what happens in a situation like this.
Revere Fire Chief Eugene Doherty says he can still recall every frightening moment. One nearly cost him his life after wading through a quarter-mile of ankle-high water on a medical call.
By the time we come out of the house, when that person decided they didn't need the medical assist, and we were walking back, the water had surged over the seawall, and just a surge. The waves were cresting, but the surge itself, the water was up to our chest. And now other people were panicking. They're in the homes all around because they just saw this wall of water coming towards their homes.
Doherty and now Deputy Chief Robert Eidenberg ended up desperately clinging to a fence, the tidal surge trying to suck them out to sea.
It sounds corny, but we were actually saying our prayers. I mean, it was that because we were numb with the cold. Nobody really knew where we were. You know, the people we had evacuated were already gone. There were some people yelling from houses to come and get them, and we could, like I said, we couldn't save ourselves at the time.
Basically had to swim with the aid of a rope over to the porch of a house, broke in the back door so we could walk out the front door so the front end loader could pick us up and take us back to dry land. And then, of course, we went back into the water again.
Eventually, hundreds of stranded Revere residents had to be evacuated on amphibious vehicles. I can still see their faces as sheer terror turned to relief.
It looked like Noah's Ark. They were pulling people out of these homes. The amphibious vehicle was absolutely loaded to capacity, but not only were people being taken out, people were also, the residents were worried about their animals. They had dogs, they had cats, they had parrots. It would actually look like Noah's Ark for a while.
By the time the sun broke, Revere firefighters had battled 11 fires in boats, trucks, and military half-tracks. The blizzard of '78, a storm for the ages.
I'll be very happy not to see it in the next 30 years.
What stories and what pictures. You know, Bill Brett was talking about the fellow who borrowed the snowmobile from Sears Roebuck. He never did find out who the fellow was. Maybe this is a chance to get reconnected, but he said he knew it was illegal, but he always admired how enterprising the young man was.
Another amazing story for Bill. We talked about the helicopter going down and him having to get out of that helicopter and go to the Scituate police station to find help. Well, Bill had gotten on the helicopter at the Boston Globe roof. He was in loafers and light clothing, and then he trudged through the snow and he walked into the back of the Scituate police station, and they looked at him like he was some sort of an alien. What are you thinking, pal?
He must have looked like a popsicle at that point. Well, he was lucky. Well, the photos of Bill Brett and the rest of the Boston Globe photo staff are all together in a new Boston Globe book called Great New England Storms of the 20th Century, with an introduction by none other than Harvey Leonard.
And you can have your own copy of Great New England Storms. It's as easy, simply, as watching this program right now. Just pay attention to the blizzard facts and figures that we report this evening, and then shortly after 8 o'clock, go to thebostonchannel.com.
And then click on the blizzard section for a pop quiz on the '78 storm. 20 entries will be selected at random to win a copy of Great Storms of the 20th Century, complete with Harvey Leonard's autograph. That's worth something.
Very valuable. So, where were you 30 years ago? The tale of a storm-spoiled wedding and more blizzard memories when we come back.
Tonight.
I took your MRI to our neurology chief. It's all just my defective brain playing tricks on me.
Visions will guide him.
What's wrong with you, Eli?
Well, maybe nothing's wrong with me. Maybe something's finally right.
The journey will inspire him.
There are those who are sent to us to help us find our way. Why not a lawyer?
And his destiny.
I know what I have to do.
Will become clear.
You changed our lives.
I think I'm going to be making a few changes to mine, too.
Eli Stone. New series premiere tonight at 10/9 Central after the 2-hour Lost event on ABC.
I had a great experience with National Floors Direct, but I couldn't pass up a 50% off sale. Well, their 50% off was still 40% more than National Floors Direct. Can you believe it? I went with National Floors Direct and saved $1,400.
At National Floors Direct, we offer next-day installation of beautiful carpeting and hardwood flooring, and we'll beat anyone's price by 15% or the floor is free. Call 888-400-FLOOR.
And no payments for a full year.
Call 888-400-FLOOR and let us bring the store to your door.
Why has it been called the greatest car on earth? Is it because it is the choice of so many world leaders? Is it because of its extraordinary reputation for safety, or its storied and celebrated history?
So we asked for your stories of 1978, and no exaggeration, we received an avalanche of responses.
Storm Team 5's J.C. Monahan with a few of those stories right now.
Some lost the roofs over their heads.
This was our home. This was my home. You see what I own.
Some were trapped for days on Route 128.
Where have we been? Howard Johnson's in Canton.
Yeah, you gonna walk home?
Yeah.
Good.
Sure are. I've been sitting there for 2 days.
Yeah? You've been there the whole time, huh?
Yeah. Well, the first night we weren't there.
Yeah.
Then we walked over.
Yeah.
Wasn't too good. The first night. Never want to do that again.
Yeah.
The storm had such a huge impact, and there were so many things to deal with. But for kids, all we noticed was how much fun it was. I can speak from experience, having been 6 years old, living in Newton, with no electricity, more importantly, no school, and more snow than I've ever seen. For adults, of course, all that snow led to all sorts of problems. For Pam and Dennis Guerrier of Billerica, it all seems like yesterday.
We had planned our wedding for February 11th of 1978, and when we heard that there was going to be a storm predicted, we were a little nervous. But I went to work on Monday, the 6th, and they let us out early. And then the next day it was snowing, and the next day it was snowing, and we kept on watching the news, and Dukakis was on and saying that there was a driving ban.
All people are to remain in their homes.
Pam was determined to be ready for the wedding and the honeymoon.
I didn't have any of the traveler's checks for the honeymoon, and I had to hike down a mile to the bank to get traveler's checks. And I hadn't got my wedding gown yet, and it was in Marblehead. So we had to go to the chief of police and get a letter giving us permission to drive because there was a driving ban.
Dennis hitched rides from 3 different snowplows to get from Melrose to Swampscott so he could comfort his nervous bride-to-be. But as the days went on, it became apparent the wedding would not go on as scheduled.
It is clear that we simply cannot permit private passenger vehicles in Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Somerville, Revere, Chelsea, and Winthrop.
The wedding was rescheduled, but the honeymoon was not. With the blessing of Pam's 89-year-old grandmother, the couple headed to Vail, Colorado.
And on the airplane ride, they actually gave us free champagne all the way out, which was terrific. And then on the way back, they did the same thing. They actually announced our name over the intercom. And we were like, geez, what's that about? And they asked us to come to the front of the plane, and they gave us a bottle of champagne. And
that was the first time I'd been called Mrs. Guerrier, and it wasn't even true yet.
On March 19th, Pam and Dennis finally tied the knot. But the wedding didn't exactly go off without a hitch. Dennis ran out of gas on his way to the ceremony. Nevertheless, he did make it to the church on time.
Anniversary's coming up, it'll be 30 years.
And we'll celebrate on the 11th of February and the 19th of March.
Back in '78, Susan Fabianic was 12 years old, living in Hull.
I remember looking out the window, seeing the ocean coming right down the street. A boat had to come and take us out of our house because the water was up right to the first floor. And then my neighbor, who was going back to Texas, had a horse. And because of the horse wouldn't have survived the storm, we put the horse on the porch.
Back then, the house had an enclosed porch, which, lo and behold, was perfect for boarding a horse. Fabianic and her 5 siblings will never forget it.
The porch started probably right here, and it went all the way to the end of the house, and that's where the horse stayed. We had roll-out windows, and he stuck his head out the window, but the house smelled really bad from the horse.
The horse made it back to Texas, but it would be a month before Susan got back into her house in Hull. Jim Lampy of Stoughton was riding a different kind of horse that February. At 5 p.m. on February 6th, he and his Mustang convertible headed south on Route 128 in Needham, where, after a mile, things came to a halt.
And that's the way it stayed. So basically everybody was just stuck in their cars there, and time kept on passing and got to be pretty late, and the snow was accumulating, and for me, I was in a convertible at the time, so it was a little cold in the car.
Lampy turned his car on and off for hours, attempting to stay warm without running out of gas. Finally, at about midnight, the National Guard arrived with rescue vehicles.
They brought us to the Newton Armory, and as luck would have it, there had been a circus there the week before, so as you can imagine, the place smelled like a little bit like a barnyard.
Lampy says he never worried about making it out. He describes the experience as more of an adventure.
It was kind of like, we're all in this together, and it was kind of like a camaraderie built around that. People getting out of their cars and fooling around and jumping in the snow and playing with each other, so it was a little bit like a party.
But you do wonder if people who are really stuck in the storm,
Right.
when it starts to snow now, do they get a little clutch in their stomach?
We
feel
actually
sick?
asked Jim Lampy about that, if he ever gets nervous driving on 128 and getting stuck in a snowstorm, or if it's snowing at all. He goes, not at all. He's totally comfortable with it.
It is interesting, isn't it? I think that's the main reaction you get from people, that they loved it. They have fond memories of it. Of course, those who are not involved in some sort of tragic incident.
Right. Now, where were you in '78?
Well, this is interesting. The storm was in February, and in March, I came to Boston for the first time. And what people forget is the snow was plowed in Government Center up 12 feet high. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And here I am, a new reporter, and people said, where are you from? I said, California. They said, are you crazy? Why are you moving here? I loved it, and I've been waiting for the repeat of that storm ever since, because everybody had such wonderful stories to tell.
The rest of us are not so anxious for a repeat of the storm, but we're glad to know that somebody out there is looking forward to it. All right, lots more of your blizzard stories on thebostonchannel.com, and it's not too late to add your own memories, so be sure to log on.
Okay, and here's the question everyone asks, including me. If it were to happen again, would we be ready? We'll have the answers for you when we come back.
You're watching Chronicle in high definition TV. Here are Mary Richardson and Anthony Everett.
Well, 30 years, of course, a very long time. And if you had to rely on the tools of 1978 meteorologists, well, that would be like maneuvering today's highway traffic in a Model T Ford.
That's a great analogy. So how would a 78-style blizzard be forecast today? Storm Team 5's Mike Wonkum brings us up to date by taking us back a few hundred years.
New England coasts have been battered by storms for centuries. Long before European settlers arrived, ocean storms helped create our unique coastline. Early New Englanders wrote of these terrible storms.
A great tempest of wind and rain. Boats cast away in the harbor. The highest tide which had been seen since arriving here. Governor John Winthrop, Massachusetts Bay Colony, 1641.
Weather folklore and a few simple instruments were about as modern as forecasting could get. Jump forward to the late 1800s. The telegraph allowed weather observations from distant locations. It was a chance to see what the wind was blowing toward New England. However, it wasn't enough to save the passengers of the SS Portland. Caught in a nor'easter, the steamship went down on its voyage from Boston to Portland, Maine in late November 1898. None of the 192 passengers and crew survived, and the storm, which became known as the Portland Gale. By the 20th century, a new era of scientific understanding was dawning. The actual landing date for the D-Day invasion of World War II was determined by a weather forecast. And in 1960, the world's first weather satellite, Tyros 1, was launched. Grainy as it was, for the first time we could now see the power and majesty of these ocean storms. Compare that with what we have today. Probably the single biggest advancement in weather forecasting has been the development of computer models. Arriving on the scene in the 1960s, these began to help unravel the complexity of the atmosphere.
Years ago, you could have two different computer models and they could be so diametrically opposed, one talking about a little bit of rain, another one talking about a blizzard, and you as a forecaster had to make a much bigger leap of faith than we do today. We still have to occasionally make pretty big leaps, but we had to make some huge leaps and more often in those days.
Back then, we would plot a lot of information ourselves on maps, plot all the levels of the atmosphere, and use the models too, but we used them with a big grain of salt back then.
Today we have access to 8 global and 7 regional models, including some of Storm Team 5's own specially designed models that interpret data from all these different sources. These computer models are complex, run on some of the most powerful computers in the world. To the uninitiated, they resemble a plate of spaghetti, but all these lines and colors tell the story of the atmosphere, a constant moving fluid.
You can't hit the pause button. And that is one thing about the computer models. They have to keep up. They have to keep up with all the changes that are happening out there. And they do a great job of it. I mean, I can't imagine forecasting without them. I know people did it, but it certainly would be much more of a challenge.
As indispensable as computer models are, they're only as good as the human forecaster, and choosing what to believe and what to ignore is a constant challenge.
Does this model make sense? You have to know which models are good in certain weather situations. In other situations, the models aren't so good. So you have to have that information. You have to know the models, what their weaknesses are, what their strengths are, and you have to use your head, use your experience too.
The only place under freezing is in the Berkshires.
Storm Team 5 has some amazing tools to work with. In 1978, we were lucky if we had one still black and white satellite photo every 6 hours. Today, it's high definition every 15 minutes. And one of the biggest advances in observation has been Doppler radar. Storm Team 5 HD Doppler was the first in Boston and is still the only high-definition radar in the region. We can look inside a storm, pinpoint where it's at, and how it will track. In 1978, we didn't really know what was going on over the Atlantic. Just a few ship reports and limited data from some buoys. Today, a couple of mouse clicks, and we can tell you what the wind, the sea, and the water temperature is. Or examine the wind flow at different altitudes. All crucial in determining a storm's impact on the coast.
Our forecasting ability has gotten better through the years. And I think the audience now expects a lot more from us than they used to because we are making forecasts that are pretty detailed.
So things have changed. We'd likely know about the magnitude of a storm the size of the blizzard of '78 48 hours before it hit. There'd still be a lot of details to iron out, but we'd know something big was going to happen. Back in 1978, getting the word out was difficult. There was radio, newspaper, and a handful of TV stations. Today, we have the BostonChannel.com, and we can send that information directly to your cell phone. So if the governor decided to shut down the state, there'd be a worldwide audience in a matter of seconds.
So it's not a matter of if the blizzard of '78 will happen again, it's only a matter of when. Preparation is the key to limiting the impact on New England.
Oh, they're all teasing me because I have been waiting. I guess it will happen again.
It'll eventually happen again.
So, but preparation is the key to keeping everyone safe, right?
That's right.
Doppler radar is now like a household word. Everybody knows it.
It is, and we love our Doppler radar because it tells us a lot of information. I'm going to talk about that right now because we have our own Doppler radar. You see the beam spinning around right now in the Hopkinton area. And it can tell us a lot of information. There's no question about it. For instance, where the snow and mix line is and where the rain line is. In this particular instance, right through Boston and Brockton and Providence, it's snow and ice, but to the east of that line, it's just plain rain. And this radar also can tell us how much snow has already fallen with a great degree of accuracy. You see this area between Amherst and Orange and up to southwestern New Hampshire, 8 to 10 inches there. In the Route 128, 495 belt, about 6 inches and 4 inches just south of Boston. Also, if we wanted to pinpoint when it was going to end, you see the rain and snow right here from Boston to Worcester, and we can pinpoint when it will end, about 20 minutes in Leominster and about 30 minutes in Fitchburg. We can also get close up to your town and see. You see between Route 3 and Route 495 here, right in the Westford and Maynard area, it is snowing. And also we can look out in the ocean and we can tell the seas, and that has ramifications for beach erosion and devastation and any storm damage right along the coast. This is our live Doppler radar. We also have Doppler net, and Harvey's going to tell us what that will do. Harvey?
All righty, Dick. You know, sometimes our weather originates from areas far away from us, so we need to be able to see more than just New England. What do? That's what we call on our Doppler net. Take a look, and you'll see what I mean. We have radars all across the Northeast, for example, from the National Weather Service in Taunton and up in Gray, Maine, around the Portland area, scanning the skies for precipitation. And when precipitation shows up, we see it. But what happens when it's farther away from us? Well, Doppler net, network of Doppler radars from the entire country, can pick that up. So if we've got snow in the Midwest and severe weather down on the Gulf Coast, we can see that, and we can get closer to each area, closer to the snow area from St. Louis to Chicago. Then we can see the severe thunderstorms down near the Gulf Coast. And when we're talking about thunderstorms, it's very important to see how they shape up in the atmosphere vertically, because after all, weather occurs in 3 dimensions. And so when we tilt back and look up, we can see how tall the thunderstorms are. We can take out the lightest precipitation, the green colors, and focus on the heaviest precipitation. The taller these storms are, the more dangerous they are. Could be producing hail, maybe even becoming tornadic. Then we can bend back to the big picture and try to estimate when precipitation will reach us. If we know the area in the Midwest is moving our way, 557 miles away and moving at 30 miles per hour, it's only about 16 hours away from reaching us. This is some of the technology we use to give you the most accurate forecast possible and to localize as much as possible. Chronicle will be back with more on the blizzard of 78 in just a couple of minutes.
At this very second, the available 4MATIC all-wheel drive system is sensing wheel slip. It automatically maintains constant wheel...
Well, we asked, and boy, did you deliver. It's time for Dick and Harvey. Lots of questions. It's time for them to answer the emails that you sent in asking about storms, blizzards, and who knows what else. You guys have to be prepared. Dick, let's put you on the spot first.
All right.
John R. writes, and he tells us, I grew up in Milford, and I know we got socked with snow in '78, but he asks, what area got the most out of the storm?
Well, the area that got the most out of the storm was definitely just south and west of the Boston area. As a matter of fact, there was one spot that unofficially got 55 inches of snow. That was in Lincoln, Rhode Island. Not what we call a cooperative observer or an official observer, but I think some of the spots did have over 40 inches. Officially, Woonsocket, Rhode Island, 38 inches, and some of the drifts were as high as 27 feet. You know how high that is, Harvey?
Yeah, I got to tell you, Anthony's a tall guy. You need to line up at least 4 Anthonys on top of each other to get a 27-foot
third.
That is a scary thought. All right, this question comes from Wayne, who wants to know, and this is one I've always wondered about myself. How do you measure snow that comes down sideways in a blizzard? You know, I know there are observation posts at the airport and other places, but when it's coming sideways, as we've seen, how do you measure that?
Well, the answer is it's not very easy, and it's not as technical as you might think. What you have to do is you simply have to get out there and you have to measure in as many different level locations as possible because of all the drifting that's going on. Measure in 10, 15, 20 places if you can, and then you average all the measurements, and that is the best estimate as to how much snow has fallen.
Boy, I don't know how they did it in the blizzard, who was measuring.
It was tough.
But it was not
Who was
easy.
standing out there?
Just to go out and do the measuring.
Exactly.
Sure.
And Nancy from Worcester has a question. How high were the wind gusts in Worcester, and how high were the snow drifts due to the drifting?
Well, in Worcester, the storm wasn't as bad as it was in the Boston area, although there were very gusty winds, gust winds of over 50 miles per hour.
That's bad enough.
That's bad enough. And officially, they got a little over 20 inches of snow with 10-foot drifts, but Boston officially 27.1, hurricane-force gusts, 79 miles an hour, 20-foot drifts. Now, look at this, 93-mile-per-hour winds in Chatham, but they only got 6 inches of snow because it turned to rain on the Cape. They were closest to the storm. There was almost an eye, it was like a hurricane with an eye.
Second day of the storm, it's still wailing away in Boston, and they're like in the eye, and it's calm, and nothing's going on. A lot of people ask, why isn't it called a hurricane with winds like that? It's the structure of the storm. It has to be a warm core storm near the center to be called a hurricane. This is a cold core storm. But these powerful nor'easters and blizzards can have winds up to in excess of hurricane force.
Characteristics like that. All right, here's a question from Priscilla. Are we due for another blizzard in New England like the blizzard of '78? And how often do they hit us?
Well, I think most of us will be happy to know that a storm of that magnitude, when you're talking about the amount of snow combined with the coastal devastation and destruction, is probably once in a lifetime. That's the blizzard of '78.
Doesn't happen very often.
Not that often. But an ordinary blizzard, which is nothing to sneeze at, we do get them around here, on average, let's say once every 5 years. But if we're in a certain pattern, it could be twice in one given winter, and maybe not for a number of winters. And by the way, the blizzard of '78 was the second blizzard that winter. 2.5 weeks prior, Boston had big winds and 21 inches of snow in 12 hours.
Well, you guys handle those questions beautifully. I might say you might win a book if you're lucky. Yeah. And it has your autograph,
right?
too.
They really know their stuff, don't they? They're good. So you got to wait a little while for you to get your blizzard of '78 again, Mary.
I'll be in a wheelchair by the time it comes.
No. All right, despite conditions, certain people had to report to work, of course, during the blizzard, and that would include police, firefighters, other rescue workers, medical staffers, utility workers, and most welcome of all, snowplow drivers.
In a separate category, though, were members of the media. Though not on life-saving assignments, TV and radio reporters were needed in certain instances to broadcast that life-saving information. It was a challenge that Peter Mahegan had never faced before or since.
This is the National Weather Service at Boston. Heavy snow warnings for Massachusetts this afternoon and tonight.
Channel 5 photographer Jake O'Callahan arrived to work at noon on Monday, February 6, 1978, with technician Paul Clark. He would not finish his shift for another 5 days.
It was just unbelievable. I mean, by 1 o'clock it was piling up. In fact, they wanted us, before we went downtown, they wanted us to go out and take some shots of the ramp right out here. We got halfway down, we walked down and we fell. And Paul said, if we don't get up now and get back up there, the wind was so strong. He says, they won't find us till spring.
The crew was able to drive through the blinding snow. It wasn't so easy for the rest of us.
In the pre-dawn hours of that first real day of the blizzard, I had to get to work as a reporter at another Boston television station. But driving was impossible, so I walked for about a mile until I came to the Cambridge city line. There, I was greeted by a 5-foot wall of snow. So I climbed up into the city of Cambridge, put on my cross-country skis, and I skied 4 miles to work. That's how I got to and from work all that week. Although on the first day, water skis might have been more useful.
By 1:30 this afternoon, more than 2 hours after high tide, the water, instead of receding, was still rising in some sections of Revere.
Back in Needham at Channel 5, a crew of 10, including Assistant Director Emmons Levine, worked tirelessly to keep the station on the air.
We all slept in our conference room every night. We went on with our eye opener in the morning. We did noon. Then we also waited for Dukakis, the governor, to come out and make his speech every day. And we worked basically from, I would say, from 5 a.m. to midnight for most of that week.
Their only food source, a vending machine, was empty after 2 days. So sports anchor Don Gillis came to the rescue.
He called over at the then Howard Johnson's, which was about a half a mile away. And he walked over. 128 at this point was totally shut down. There was only one lane of traffic, and that was for emergency vehicles only. He walked over to the Howard Johnson's, and 4 hours later he came back with 50 cold hamburgers, but they never tasted so good.
Mike Barnacle was writing his column for the Boston Globe during the blizzard. He started the day, like many other hockey fans, at the Beanpot.
Couldn't get home, went to the Globe. And basically, myself and probably 12, 15 other people for the first 2 days of the blizzard, we lived at the Globe. I mean, it was great.
And now, a quarter of a century later,
you can still see the impact and the effect that the blizzard had on us today, all these years later, by going to any grocery store in this area on the afternoon when flurries begin. People, and of every age, not necessarily people our age who went through the blizzard, people of every age rushing in to clear the shelves of milk and bread as if there's going to be no tomorrow.
But the sun did come out back in '78, several days after the storm began. Jake O'Callahan remembers droves of Revere residents finally able to leave their homes.
Just everybody, came together, especially that last day. It was a great feeling when all the people were out on Broadway. It was just to look down there and see thousands of people, and they were all talking and, they were just together, outside, and it was just it was a good feeling, and I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad it was over. And it was just a good feeling. And I was glad
You know, that's a favorite story of Peter's about how he's walking along through his hometown and he comes to the Cambridge border and he said it was just a wall of snow as high as he could see. And he remembers thinking that the taxpayers in his town were really getting their money's worth because the streets were quite clear.
And that's dedication. I mean, Peter puts on the skis and
yeah,
cross-country
no kidding.
skis to work.
Well, you know what? It was the reporter in him. He would never miss a good story.
And after the sun finally did come out, then what? We'll have that story right after this short break.
As Peter Mahegan pointed out, Harvey, almost as striking as the blizzard itself was the aftermath.
You know, 2 days after the snows began, the sun came out, and the original Big Dig began. Not knowing when life would get back to normal, New Englanders seemed to take it all in stride.
We've been out here since late Monday night, and hopefully we'll get home today, but it doesn't look that way now.
How about you? How's your family?
I called them. My wife and baby are all right. Just wondering when I'm ever going to get home.
Even in some of the emergency shelters, calm prevailed.
She's not complaining at all. Simon says hands on your knees.
So many people remember acts of kindness and generosity.
The cooperation of everybody in this town and how everybody pulled together. The soldiers, the National Guardsmen, the Red Cross volunteers, the people that weren't affected in any way.
Many of us walked and skied the city streets, charmed by a return to a simpler life. Many were grateful just to get out of the house.
Well, we haven't been out for a while. It's just good exercise and given a chance to restock the cupboard. We've been in for 4 days.
It was a unique moment in time that brought out the best in us.
Everybody seems to be working together, pulling together, sending the neighbor down to pick up a loaf of bread or a half gallon of milk. I think everybody is acting more like human beings.
More like a human being than they would ordinarily?
That's right.
There was that great human connection that everybody talks about throughout that travail that everybody lived through. What was the, because I don't remember, the total damage estimate after all of that?
Well, in terms of the devastation on the coast, seawalls shattered, concrete just, shattered, it was $500 million. But in today's dollars, because construction costs have gone up so much, probably be between $2 and $3 billion.
That's fairly similar, a little worse than a Hurricane Bob. So it's like a hurricane coming up here with all the damage that would cause, about the same amount of damage in the blizzard of '78.
And yet, isn't it funny that so many people's memories are positive? The feelings. Yeah, I think so too.
The community feeling that generated, and the feeling that we have to run to the supermarket every time.
That'll never go away.
That's what lasts forever.
That started it.
Thank you guys, you were terrific.
Yeah, you really were.
Great.
Thank you. That is our program for tonight. Be sure to log on to thebostonchannel.com to win a copy of Great New England Storms of the 20th Century, signed by Harvey Leonard. And to win, all you have to do is answer our online Blizzard quiz.
And don't forget, the Blizzard section of thebostonchannel.com is chock full of slideshows, personal photos, memories, and pictures of the storm itself. Information from our Storm Track team is also on there. Lots of good stuff. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. I'm Mary Richardson.
And I'm Anthony Everett. Have a good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow night.
Good night.